Welcome everyone to this section of the course on the Seaborn Data Visualization Library. Seaborn is a statistical plotting library that is specifically designed to interact well with Pandas data frames in order to create common statistical plot types like histograms and scatter plots. It's important to note that Seaborn, while being built directly off of Matplotlib, it actually uses a simpler one-line syntax. So pretty much all the plots we're going to be creating are just done in a single one-line call. However, this does come at a trade-off. So typically when you're using Seaborn, you're trading off heavy customization for ease of use. However, since we now already know about Matplotlib, since we learned that first, we can actually still make PLT method calls to directly affect the resulting Seaborn plot. So Seaborn, essentially what it's doing, it's an abstraction above Matplotlib commands, and it's grabbing the same figure objects and the same axes objects that we just learned about in Matplotlib, but it's doing this all with a kind of one-line function call. And because we already know Matplotlib, we can actually then edit and grab the figure and axes as we need. So a typical Seaborn plot uses one line of code. For example, if we wanted to make a scatter plot, it could look something like this. You just say SNS, which is the way we import Seaborn. Then you call the plot type you want, in this case scatter plot, and you just say what do you want on the x-axis, what do you want on the y-axis, and then what's the source of your data. And you'll notice X and Y here are just strings because those are the actual column names found in the data frame we pass in as data. So pretty much all these Seaborn calls are going to take in a Pandas data frame, and then the user provides what actual string column name they want for X versus Y. Obviously it depends on the plot type, what you're going to provide for X and Y. Okay, so in this section of the course we really focus on understanding the use cases for each plot as well as the Seaborn syntax for them. So while you may be familiar with some of these plot types, especially if you have some training in statistics, what we are going to do is have a little bit of time to reflect on why and when you're going to use a specific plot type before actually coding it out in Seaborn. I would actually really recommend that you check out the online documentation just to get some ideas of what you can do with Seaborn. And it's available for you at seaborn.pydata.org. Now, a really common student question I get when they're starting to learn about Seaborn and they kind of get overwhelmed with all the plot types is, how do I choose which plot to use? And again, it kind of really depends on what questions or relationships you're trying to understand. And sometimes those questions don't even really require a plot. They just require some sort of mean or statistical description. So I would actually recommend that if you Google image search something like choosing a plot visualization, it really yields a lot of many useful flowcharts that help allow you to answer that question of what plot type you're trying to use. Typically, it's going to guide you through something like, well, are you trying to show a relationship or trying to show a distribution, etc. And then it'll have some suggested plots. So hopefully though, at the end of this section, you're going to have a good intuition of which plot types to use, depending on what questions you're trying to answer. The actual section topics we're going to be discussing is we'll first talk about scatter plots, then distribution plots like a histogram or a KDE plot, then categorical plots. We'll actually separate that out into two separate types of different categorical plots. Then we'll talk about general comparison plots. We'll move on to Seaborn grids. Those aren't really plot types, but it's actually a special syntax mechanic with Seaborn that allows you to show plots right next to each other. And then we'll talk about matrix plots, things like heat maps. And of course, after all this, we'll have an exercise to test your new skills. So I'm super excited. Seaborn is one of my favorite libraries, and I hope it quickly becomes one of yours as well. So let's get started. I'll see you in the next lecture.